أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين آمين والحمد لله رب العالمين أما بعد. Today, inshallah, we're carrying on with ablution. We're finishing with the things which nullify your ablution, inshallah. All that exits from the front or rear private parts, even if it is something that is unusual, for example, worms or stones, if these come out from the front or the back, then this nullifies the wudu, so you have to go get wudu again. Wind that exits from the rear, not wind that exits from the front. Sometimes this can happen, unless it's in a female who has a medical condition where they're combined through a hole. But because that's a very rare case from what I understand, any wind that exits from the rear nullifies your ablution, so you have to go get wudu again. Filth that exits a wound and flows. This is important. Or has the inherent strength to flow. So a lot of people, they think that if they get a wound and they put a plaster on it, that blood won't nullify your ablution. But how we understand it is if it flows by itself, or if it actually has the inherent strength to flow, but you just keep wiping it and you don't allow it to flow, even that nullifies your ablution. So where is it supposed to flow? Onto an area that must be cleaned during the purificatory bath. So the outside of your body, basically, because in ghusl we have to wash the complete outside of our body. So what that means is if you have something inside your ear and it's bleeding, but it's flowing not outside but inside the ear, or similarly if it's in your throat is bleeding and you can taste blood, but when you spit, because in the ghusl you have to wash your mouth, when you spit there's no blood. So we understand it to be a bit deeper down. So all of this, even though you're bleeding, because it's not blood which is flowing towards what you would normally wash during the ghusl, during the bath, then we understand it to not nullify your wudu. So even if it does not exit on its own but is squeezed out, so if you get a cut and you squeeze out the blood, then again, this would also nullify your wudu. So in the Hanafi madhab, there's two different kinds of blood. There's flowing blood and there's non-flowing blood. According to us, non-flowing blood does not invalidate the wudu, and neither is it considered impure. So if you were to get a small cut and the blood isn't flowing, but you ended up getting it on your clothes, then we don't count this as impure. The same goes with blood from raw meat. For example, a butcher, he'll have blood on his clothes. Why? Because he's dealing with slaughtered meat. But as long as that slaughter was done in the halal way, which includes after slicing the jugular, to let the animal drain the blood. So once that blood is drained from the animal, any blood left over in its meat is not najis because it's not flowing blood. But if it's been slaughtered in a haram way, if it died by itself, or it wasn't slaughtered in the halal way where the blood was allowed to flow, then all of it would be impure and najis. The fourth one is a mouthful of vomit, such that it cannot be contained in the mouth except with difficulty. So we're not talking about a little bit that comes out maybe when you go into sajda during Ramadan, or something like that. We're talking about a proper mouthful of vomit. This includes vomiting bile, clotted blood, and food, but it does not include phlegm. The quantum of multiple vomits is added together if the cause, that is nausea, is 1. So if the reason you're throwing up is the same reason, then all of those little vomits you do, you would add them together and see, was it a lot or was it not much? But if the reason is different, then we count them as 2 separate cases, and you wouldn't add those vomits, let's say, to each other. So if the reason you're throwing up is the same reason, and you threw up a little bit, and then like 5 minutes later you throw up a little bit again, for example, you would add all of those up, and then you would see, is it a mouthful or not? But if the reason is different, for example, you threw up because of a bad smell, and then like 5 minutes later you threw up maybe because a lady threw up maybe because they're pregnant, and then 5 minutes later they threw up because of another reason, we wouldn't add these together. They're separate cases. Fifth, blood that overcomes saliva or is equal to it. So if you taste blood in the mouth, then you would spit it out, and you would check, is the saliva more or is the blood more? If it's equal, then your wudu is nullified, and if it's more than equal, then again, of course, your wudu is nullified. 6, a leech that sucks on a limb and becomes full of blood. Why? Because a leech sucks so much that we consider it as flowing blood. So you have lost flowing blood. And large ticks from which flowing blood exits. If blood does not flow out from the tick, ablution is not nullified. So we say, because the tick isn't that big, as long as when you like remove the tick, if there's no blood flowing, then we don't count it as a large quantity of blood. But a leech is huge compared to a tick. That is definitely flowing blood. If blood does not flow out from the tick, ablution is not nullified, and it is not nullified by fleas, lice, or gnats, even though these all suck blood, including mosquitoes, obviously. Even though these all suck blood, because they don't suck so much blood, we don't count it as flowing blood. It's not a large quantity of blood. So only with leeches and big ticks do you have to be careful. The 7th one is sleeping. If one's rear, or their backside, is not firmly seated, if it is firmly seated, ablution is not nullified, even if the sleeper is leaning against something which is removed, which if removed, he would fall. So he's completely fallen asleep, but because his backside is firmly seated, we say that there's no worry of wind passing when his muscles relax. Because the reason we say that sleep nullifies your ablution is because the muscles relax, and when the muscles relax, you are no longer in control of wind coming from the backside. So, but if someone is sitting down and their backside is firmly seated, so they're not lying down, they're sitting down. Even if they are leaning against something and they've completely gone, so much so that if you were to remove whatever they're leaning on, they would fall down. So that's the state of sleep they're in, they're completely gone. Even if this is the case, their sleep does not nullify their ablution. 8, unconsciousness. So if someone were to faint, when they wake up, their wudu is nullified. 9 is insanity. 10 is drunkenness. All of these instances, if you believe you've lost your mind for a moment, you have to go get wudu again. Same with drunkenness. Drunkenness can most of the time, usually it's alcohol, but sometimes drunkenness can be from other things. For example, if you've had an operation and they've given you things like morphine, heroin, or anything else to relieve the pain that you're in, we would count this all as drunkenness. And you would have to go get wudu again. Loud laughter from an awake adult whilst praying a prayer that contains bowing and prostrating. So most of our prayers contain bowing and prostrating anyways. Which prayers don't? For example, janazah. Janazah doesn't include bowing and prostrating. So any other prayer that includes bowing and prostrating, if you were to laugh out loud, and when we say out loud, that means loud enough to hear yourself. Loud enough for someone next to you to hear you, even if they don't hear you. So it was loud enough for them to be able to hear you, but for example, you ask them, did you hear me? They say no, but even they should have, for example. Or, for example, you're in a room by yourself, so there's no one next to you to hear you, but that doesn't mean you can laugh out loud. It's telling you that, basically it's telling you the measurement of decibels, of how loud you can laugh until your wudu is nullified in salah. Because even if there's no one next to you, your wudu would still be nullified. So what we understand from here is loud enough that if someone was next to you, they could hear you, is how we would say it. Even if someone was next to you and they didn't hear you, that doesn't mean that you didn't laugh loud enough for them, that you didn't laugh loud enough for them to hear you. It's just that they didn't hear you at that moment, or they weren't paying attention, for example. So I've seen this a lot, because somebody laughs in prayer, and he just turns around to the person next to him and he goes, "Did you hear me?" And that person goes, "Hear what?" And he goes, "Okay." But that doesn't mean that you didn't laugh loud enough for him to hear you. He might have just been distracted. He might have not understood that it was laughter. From an awake adult whilst playing a prayer that contains bowings and prostrating, even if these are fulfilled by head gestures. Okay, so we're not talking about praying sitting down. We're talking about the salah itself, including a ruku and a sajda. And the worshipper is in a state of wakefulness. If one laughs deliberately upon the closing salam. So for example, he sat down, he's finished his at-tahiyyatu, he's read his Salli Barik, he's read his Allahumma Rabbana Atina, but right before he gives salam, he laughs. So what happens? Ablution is invalidated, but not the prayer. Why? Because we haven't gotten there yet, but the fard of salah is qiyam, qiraat, ruku, sajda, qa'da, akhirah. Right? It's standing, it's reciting, it's ruku, it's sajda, it's the last sitting. And obviously it's the takbir in the beginning. Some people count that as inside of salah, some people count it as outside of salah. But either way, it's fard. So these 6 are the fard. None of these 6, salam isn't one of these 6, giving the salam. So what we say is, once someone's finished their last sitting, even before they give salam, all of their fard are done. So therefore, if something were to happen to your wudu after you've read at-tahiyyatu, we say that you don't have to actually return to your prayer, because you've done all the fard, and you've done all the wajib too, because at-tahiyyatu itself is wajib. So we say you've done all the wajib and you've done all the fard. The salam, some do consider that wajib. So we would say it's wajib for you to get wudu, sit back down and give salam. So in the Hanafi madhab, there is the idea of returning back to your salah. You don't have to start from the beginning. However, most of the time we just tell people to start from the beginning, because most likely they're going to do something wrong. And while getting wudu, you have to make sure that you didn't do anything that would normally nullify your salah, like talking and whatnot. So, because you would count yourself as in salah, you would go get wudu, come back without talking to anybody, without doing anything, extra, and you would immediately carry on from where you left off. But because that's difficult, we just say start from the beginning. And the 12th one, we're talking about which nullifies ablution, not which nullifies ghusl. So contact without a barrier between the erect penis and the vagina of a female old enough to invoke sexual interest. So the contact itself would nullify the ablution. But obviously, if it were to enter, that would nullify the ghusl also. But just the contact would nullify ablution. So normal skin contact with private parts of either a man or a woman does not nullify the ablution, unlike the Maliki madhab. So if you were to, your hand was to touch there, down there, whether it's yourself or somebody else's, then we say that ablution isn't nullified, you just wash your hands. But the Maliki madhab says even if it's yourself and your hand touches, right, your ablution is nullified. So the way they get ghusl is they would wash those areas first, and then they would cover themselves, which is sunnah anyways, to cover your private parts during ghusl. Obviously after washing it, you wash it properly, you cover it, and then they wouldn't touch that place again, because the Maliki madhab requires you to rub everywhere. So not only do they have to rub their private parts, as in while washing, their hand has to touch it, but when they touch it, the ablution is gone. So what they would do, that would be the first thing they wash, and then they won't touch it again. So by the end of the ghusl, they have ablution also. So this was the end of wudu ablution. If there's any questions, you can send them in. We're going to carry on with ghusl, inshallah. So what we call the purificatory bath, what we mean by that is just a ghusl. It means having a bath, having a shower. When is having a shower? I'm gonna just say shower here. When is having a shower fard? The fard of the shower, right? The things that you have to do, the bare minimum, is to wash once all of the mouth, to wash once the nose, and to wash once the remainder of the body that is possible to wash without difficulty. So obviously, if you wanted, you could wash all the way down your throat and into your ears and everything, but all of that is difficulty. We say normally, just with your normal hands, what's easy to wash. Whatever's easy to wash, you need to wash. It is not mandatory upon a woman to unbraid her hair if water reaches the roots of her hair. If water is reaching the scalp, right, the roots, then a lady doesn't have to unbraid her hair. However, it is mandatory for a man to undo his braids if water does not reach all of his hair, even if water reaches the roots of his hair. Right, so even if the water is reaching the roots, a man has to unbraid his hair if he has braids. Now, remember, as a general rule, when we're reading fiqh and we read a statement like this, what we are not allowed to do is derive rulings from this other than what is being openly stated. What does that mean? That means that just because it talked about a man having braids doesn't mean a man is allowed to have braids. That's not the ruling we take from this. What we take is if a man has braids, he has to undo his braids in ghusl. What we don't take from this is a man is allowed to have braids. So in fiqh, you'll see this a lot. It'll talk about, if a man is wearing gold or something. And, obviously we know that it's haram for a man to wear gold, but if someone reading that didn't understand the principles of reading fiqh, they might think that, men can wear gold, it's in the fiqh book. But what it's actually doing is just telling you if a man is wearing gold. So if a man is committing that sin, then A, B, C. So when we read fiqh, we don't derive rulings from it like it's Quran. We don't go too deep into examples. For example, if a book does give examples, we don't dive too deep into the examples. We don't start dissecting the example, because the analogies are only, limited. So this was the fard. What were the fard? To wash the whole body, to wash the mouth and the nose. Okay? A woman does not have to undo her braids. A man does have to undo his braids. Sunnah of the purificatory bath. To commence with the name of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, before exposing one's nakedness. So this means before you've exposed your nakedness, and because in England our toilets and our baths are considered are in the same place, what we would do is we would just say Bismillah before we even entered the toilet, right? Before we even entered the restroom. So we would say Bismillah before entering, and then we would make our intention. This is Sunnah. And then we would start by washing the hands, the front and the rear private parts, and any filth that is upon the body that you know of. The time to wash it is now. So you've just started. The first thing you do is remove filth from the body and wash the private parts. Give me one moment. Okay. I was muted. So we start by washing our hands, our front and rear private parts, and any filth that is on the body, we get rid of those. Washing the front and rear private parts, even if there's no filth upon them. So we don't, even if there's no filth on them, washing them as first is sunnah. But if there's any filth on any other part of the body, to also wash that first is sunnah. After the above actions, one performs ablution. So after doing the front and rear private parts and washing your hands and whatnot, you start getting wudu just like you would for salah. So you're having a shower, but you get wudu like you're going to pray salah, even if you don't have ghusl, right? Because normally what we say, if somebody doesn't have ghusl, they're unable to get wudu. But it's sunnah that while getting ghusl, in the beginning, you wash the areas that you would wash for wudu. So you would basically get wudu, even though it doesn't count as wudu, right? Thereafter, one pours water on the entire body 3 times, starting with the head, then the right shoulder, followed by the left shoulder, and finally the rest of the body, whilst rubbing during the first washing. So we wash our whole body 3 times. We start with the head, then the right shoulder, then the left shoulder, then the rest of the body. During the first wash, we rub our whole body, to clean properly. All of this is sunnah. So for the Hanafis, washing 3 times is sunnah, rubbing is sunnah, intention is sunnah, getting wudu before ghusl is sunnah, and then continuity in washing. This is the same as in the wudu subject, where if somebody were to wash, for example, their hair and their head, basically, let's say their head, and then 10 minutes later they wash their right arm, and then 10 minutes later they wash their left arm. So even if there's no continuity, eventually if you wash your whole body and your mouth and nose, then we would say that this person has a ghusl, even though he did it bit by bit, and obviously not according to the sunnah way of doing it. During the purificatory bath, it is valid to transfer wetness from one limb to another on the condition that drops of water are transferred. This is not permissible during ablution. So let's read that again. During the purificatory bath, so during ghusl, it is valid to transfer wetness from one limb to another on the condition that drops of water are transferred. This is not permitted during ablution. What does that mean? That means is you need to make sure that it's wet enough to drip off the second limb. If it's not wet enough, then it's not considered washing, it's considered wiping. So for example, you take water that is on your left arm and you use that water to wash your right arm, for example, or vice versa. As long as that water is enough to drip off your second limb, we count that as valid. We don't count that as valid in ablution. We don't do that in ablution. But in ghusl, you're allowed to do that. You just need to make sure that you're not wiping your washing. So it needs to be a substantial amount of water, enough to start dripping off the second limb. If one is immersed in running water or moves around in a large quantity of still water, the sunnah is fulfilled. Which sunnah? The 3 times washing sunnah. So you don't have to get out and jump into a pool three times for it to be counted as you washing your body 3 times. As long as you stay in there long enough to wash your body 3 times, then we consider that as the sunnah being done. Because we don't say that the sunnah is to wash 3 times, we say the sunnah is to be thorough. And that is 3 times, or something similar to this. So if you were to just, swim around long enough to have a proper ghusl 3 times, which isn't long, then we would say that the sunnah is valid and you have washed your body 3 times. Actions that are decorum in ablution are also decorum in the purificatory bath. So whatever we talked about in ablution also applies here. So you don't, obviously, other than facing the qibla, because you would be in a state of, nakedness, you don't face the qibla, but anything else that you do in ablution, you do here also. Like not talking, not splashing water everywhere, where possible, obviously, and so on and so forth. Acts which are disliked during ablution are also disliked during the purificatory bath. So you shouldn't be talking, you shouldn't have somebody else helping you for no reason, and other examples. So what makes the purificatory bath, so the shower, obligatory? So there are situations in where you have to have a shower. It's fard. After the emission of sexual fluid, so we call this in Arabic mani, right? Which left its usual place in the body due to sexual desire. This ruling applies even if there is no sexual desire upon emission and there was no sexual intercourse. So, what does this mean? There is a situation in which a man can, during the ejaculation, hold his private part tightly so that nothing comes out. So, what it's saying here is, even if a man does that and nothing comes out, because it left its original place, right? Because in the body, it left its original place with the sexual desire, then you have lost your ghusl. Now, the head of a man's private part, or the length of the head, if the head has been severed for whatever reason, enters the private part or the back part of any living person, and the living person is the like of whom is desired for sexual intercourse. This ruling applies even if there is no emission of sperm. So just the entering itself nullifies the ghusl. Which means you need to go get ghusl. And we say of a living being because obviously you've got some weirdos out there. And we say of sexual, a desirable person, as in not too young, not too old. You know, all of these things in history, things have happened that have required us to give rulings about them, even though, you know, you definitely go to Jahannam for some of these acts. Yani. If the individuals are legally responsible, the purificatory bath is obligatory upon both of them. If only one of them is, it is mandatory on this individual alone. Right? So whoever's the adult, right? If they're both adults, they both need to get a ghusl. If only one of them is an adult, which obviously would be haram, but we're not talking about haram here, we're talking about ghusl. The subject is ghusl. We would say that the person, whoever the adult is, they need to get a ghusl. By consensus, the purificatory bath is mandatory upon the one who sees wetness after rising from sleep. And so in this book, normally when it says mandatory, it means wajib. And by consensus, when we usually say consensus in Hanafi fiqh, we just mean consensus between our three imams, which are Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Muhammad, and Imam Abu Yusuf. Because they don't have a consensus on many topics. The purificatory bath is mandatory upon the one who sees wetness after rising for sleep. And so here we're talking about a man, okay? Knows that it is medhi, does not know whether it is many or medhi, does not know whether it is many or wadi, does not know whether it is medhi or wadi, does not know whether it is many, medhi or wadi. Okay? F knows that it is many. So what we can say here is, if you know it's either medhi, and if you know that it is many, then you need to go get ghusl. Okay? Now, you don't know, right? You have doubts whether it is many or medhi. So I'm going to get to what medhi is. And you don't know whether it is many or wadi. And you don't know whether it is medhi or wadi. Okay, so either one. Many medhi, many wadi, medhi wadi. Okay? Does not know whether it is many medhi or wadi, so it could be either three. Right? So you're either worried about it being either one of these two, or you're worried about it being either one of these three, and they're all the same thing. Because you do not know, you have to go get ghusl. Understood? So, so the person sleeps, they wake up, and they're wet. Okay? Now, if they absolutely know that it's a wadi, right, then they don't have to go get wudu. They don't have to go get ghusl. But anything else, if they are unsure whether it's wadi or not, right, it could be many, it could be medhi, then they have to go get ghusl. So what is the difference between all three of these? It should say on the bottom. So, medhi is what we call pre-sexual fluid. Is a thin white fluid that exits when one is aroused during foreplay and kissing. So this isn't the sperm, but it's what comes before that, and it serves some sort of lubricating function. Sometimes its exiting may not be felt, and it does not leave the person listless. Wadi, though, okay, is a thick white fluid that has no smell and exits following urination. It can also exit when you lift, if a man lifts something really heavy. when their body is under strain, although it sometimes precedes it, sometimes it may come before urination or after urination, like urine. Medi and wadi are both filth and nullify ablution, but the purificatory bath does not become mandatory. So they both ruin your wudu, because we said anything that comes out from the front or the back ruins your wudu, right? But they don't ruin your ghusl. Okay, so if it's pre-sexual fluid, or it's a thick white fluid that comes before or after urinating, then you don't need to get a ghusl. Obviously, you need to get wudu. The only thing that nullifies your ghusl is what we call mani, and that is the sperm which ejaculates from a man. So that would ruin the ghusl. So if we were to look here again, if you know that it's medi, why would that ruin your ghusl, a man's ghusl? When they wake up, they know it's not many, but they know it's medi, right? Because medi comes straight before mani. It's the pre-sexual fluid. So because you know that it's medi, you know that there was some arousal during sleep. So any of the rest of that stuff may be many. Okay, maybe a mix of both, right? So that's why if you wake up and you know it's medi, then you have to go get a ghusl again. Why? Because medi comes straight before mani does, sperm does. So anything else, it's because there's a doubt, right? Is it mani? Is it medi? Even if you knew it was many, or even if you knew it was medi, you were going to get a ghusl anyways, because it says if you know it's medi and you know it's many, you have to go get a ghusl. So if you don't know whether it's many or medi, you have to go get a ghusl again anyways, right? Because either one would break your ghusl. Now, you don't know whether it is many or wadi, right? You don't know whether it's just a random wadi that sometimes will come out randomly, or many. Or you don't know whether it's medi or wadi. So you know absolutely that it's not many, but you don't know whether it's medi or wadi. Okay, again, medi would ruin your ghusl, so you have to go get ghusl again. And you don't know whether it's many, medi or wadi. In this case, you don't know anything, so you have to go get ghusl again. In the above 6 scenarios, the purificatory bath is mandatory when one remembers experiencing a wet dream. So this is the condition. It says it at the end. It says all of this is only if the man remembers the wet dream, or they remember having a wet dream. They don't need to remember details. If they remember having a wet dream, then these rules apply. So what if they don't? If they don't remember having any dream and they woke up wet, so if one knows it's many, right, then obviously they need to go get ghusl, whether you remember a wet dream or not. Right? If you know it's many, then you have to go get a ghusl or not. So, what did we say? Medi, we said, doesn't normally break your ghusl, but we said if you have medi after seeing a wet dream, when you remember you had a wet dream, right? The medi would ruin your ghusl. Why? Because that comes straight before sperm does. So that's why not knowing whether it's many or medi doesn't matter, because you remember having a wet dream, and that is enough to tell us that the medi would have come right before sperm did, and sperm would have come out. So we say that you have to go get a ghusl. It's too dangerous at that point, right? The only thing that wouldn't ruin it is wadi, if you knew 100% that it's wadi. But anything else, if you don't know 100% that it's wadi, anything else, if you remember a dream, will ruin your ghusl. But if you know 100% that it's many, then even if you don't remember a dream, then it's ghusl time. So by consensus, the purificatory bath is not mandatory upon the one who sees wetness after rising from sleep and knows 100% that it's wadi. So it's just random thingy that comes out, regardless of whether one remembers experiencing a wet dream or not. Okay, if you know that it's wadi, and remember wadi is the fluid that just randomly comes out. It can come out during stress, like on the body. It can come out during urination. So it's basically nothing. It's got nothing to do with sexual desire, basically. So this wadi will just randomly come out sometimes. So even if you remember a wet dream or not, if you know 100% that it's wadi, it's got nothing to do with sexual things. You know it is medi and does not remember experiencing a wet dream. Okay, so you know that it's not many. You know that it's medi because it's light, or it doesn't have a color. Then either even if you don't remember seeing a wet dream, but you know that it's definitely not sperm, then you don't have to go get ghusl. Okay, so if you don't know whether it's medi or wadi and you don't remember a wet dream, remember, because neither of these ruin your ghusl. So you don't remember a wet dream and you don't know whether it's medi or wadi, but because neither of these break your ghusl anyways, nullify your ghusl anyways, as long as you don't remember a wet dream, we say that it's most likely not likely to be sperm. Like you yourself are saying it's not sperm, it's either medi or wadi, but I don't remember seeing a wet dream. Then you don't have to go get ghusl. So this is important for the ladies to know also. Why? Because you're gonna have sons. Most likely husbands don't know this stuff. Unfortunately, most of them don't research this stuff. So it's up to the women of the household to teach these things now. According to Abu Hanifa and Imam Muhammad, due precaution demands that the purificatory bath is mandatory upon the one who sees wetness after rising from sleep and does not know either of these. So this, all we read now, that was Imam Abu Yusuf. Okay, remember our madhab has many imams. Sometimes they disagree with Imam Abu Hanifa. So according to Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Muhammad, so we're going to read the same stuff but now with different rulings. Precaution demands that the purification bath is mandatory upon the one who sees wetness after rising from sleep and does not know if it's medi or many, right? Because many will ruin your ghusl. So it's either medi or many, but you don't know. But because there's many there, you would have to go get ghusl. You don't know whether it's many or wadi. Because many is there, right? The sperm, it might be sperm. You have to go get ghusl again. And you don't know whether it's many, medi or wadi. Or you have absolutely no idea. It's wet, but you don't know what it is. It's dried up by the time you've woken up. You have to go get ghusl. Okay, so whenever you have a doubt about it being many, you have to go get ghusl. In these cases, it is not mandatory according to Abu Yusuf. Okay, as there is uncertainty about the existence of that which makes the purificatory bath mandatory, and that is many. Okay. Now, the purificatory bath is mandatory upon the existence of wetness found after sobering up from intoxication or regaining consciousness after having lost it, and one thinks that it is many. So, we talked about sleep, but if someone were to get drunk and then when they've come to, they realize that they've got wetness down there, again, as long as they believe that it may be many, they have to go get ghusl. Same thing is if someone faints. So fainting and sleeping, same thing for us. The purificatory bath is not mandatory if one remembers experiencing a wet dream but does not see any wetness, even if one remembers experiencing pleasure and emission of sperm. So even if you remember the dream vividly and you remember ejaculating in the dream, but when you wake up, there's no wetness at all, you don't have to go get ghusl. So we don't get ghusl according to dreams. A woman is like a man in all the above matters. So if you believe that the wetness that you woke up with had something to do with a wet dream, or had something to do with ejaculation, then you would also follow these rules that the man follows. Where do you believe that it was ejaculation fluid? Whether do you believe that it was just normal daily fluid which comes out, or do you believe that it was sort of pre-seminal? Whether that exists or not, I don't know, but you would follow these rules. If fluid is found between a husband and wife or another two individuals and there is nothing to discern whom this emanated from, and neither of them remembers experiencing a wet dream, they should both perform the purificatory bath. Okay? Okay. Where else do people need to get ghusl? After the cessation of the menstrual period and postnatal lochia. So after you've given birth and the bleeding has stopped, it can take up to maximum 40 days in Islam, and the menstrual period, okay, after that ceases, either it ceases to stop bleeding or your 10 days are up. After 10 days, we consider it as just like a nosebleed. You would have to go get ghusl. The purificatory bath is not obligatory after the emission of medi and wedi. Okay, like we said, these two, right? So the pre-seminal fluid and the one that just randomly comes out, these two, they don't ruin your ghusl. The insertion of a finger or the like, for example, an injection into the front or rear private parts, and this goes for both men and women, this does not ruin your ghusl. Intercourse with an animal or a corpse. Remember, we're not saying it's allowed. We're just saying if someone were to do this, then the ghusl would not be invalid unless they ejaculate. Intercourse with a girl not old enough to ordinarily invoke sexual interest, such that sexual intercourse causes pain and harm. This ruling applies even if the head of the penis disappears into either the front or the back, but there is no emission of sperm. So we look at sexual desire. Is sexual desire there? If it's not, like, it might be from the man, but normally in the normal instance, this wouldn't exist. For example, for an animal or a dead person, right? Normally, obviously, that person's doing it because they're sexually aroused, but we say a normal human being wouldn't be sexually aroused by this stuff. So if something like this were to happen, we have to give it a ruling, even though, you know, we would be the first people to stone these people to death. All right, but things happen and we have to give rulings to them. And he enters a virgin, but her hymen is not stretched open. So that would, you know, tell us that the entrance wasn't done. Ablution is not nullified by intercourse with an animal or corpse if no fluid is emitted. Like we said, if there's no fluid coming out and it's something that is not sexually arousable, let's say, something that normally people don't get sexually aroused by, then intercourse with anything that is normally not meant for that would not ruin your ghusl unless you emitted sperm, ejaculated. So this could be like normal items too, around the house or things like that. Anything that is normally not something that would arouse sexual pleasure, intercourse with it would only ruin your ghusl if you ejaculated. This does not mean that it's allowed. This does not mean that as long as you don't ejaculate, it's fine. There is no ruling like this. That's not what is understood here. Remember, when we're reading fiqh, we only understand what is explicitly stated. We don't go and say, oh, so if you don't ejaculate, then your ghusl's not broken. That means it's allowed. No, that ruling, it doesn't say that. It doesn't infer that. There's no such thing. So we're going to stop here because it's been quite long. Actually, we'll just finish these three real quick and then we'll stop here, inshallah. It is a communal obligation, fard kifaya, for Muslims who are alive to wash the body of a deceased Muslim if they are aware of it. The true hermaphrodite is an exception and is given a dry ablution. So if someone dies, washing them is fard upon everybody. But as long as one person does it, remember it's fard kifaya. As long as one person does it, the rest don't have to do it. So if we were to hear that a Muslim has died, we would ask, is someone washing them? If we hear that nobody's washing them, we have to go and wash them. Similarly, if it is mandatory upon the one who enters Islam in a state of major ritual impurity during the menstrual period or in postnatal lochia. Okay, so if someone were to become Muslim, we would have to ask them. You know, obviously you wouldn't ask, but you would infer that, listen, in these sort of instances, Muslims get ghusl. If this applies to you, then you need to go get ghusl. And then if you reach puberty by emission of sexual fluid or menstrual blood, okay? So the first period and the first ejaculation will put you into what we call puberty, but that would also mean that you need to go get ghusl. So you can reach it by a maximum age requirement, right? Sometimes people just don't ejaculate until they're like 15 or even further on. But we say once they've finished their 15th year of life, so when they're 16, we say that they've become they're now adults and giving birth, but there is no postnatal lochia. if somebody somehow didn't have any periods throughout their whole life, right? They got pregnant and then they gave birth. When they give birth, they would be counted as, in puberty. Otherwise, the purificatory bath is recommended if one enters Islam in a state of purity. So if someone just had a shower with their mouth and nose and everything, and then they became a Muslim, we would still say it's nice if you go get your ghusl again. Or reaches puberty by meeting the maximum age requirement. So even though you're completely fine, it's just that the day has gone by. Just because you're in puberty now, it's nice if you go and get ghusl without any emission. Okay? So we're going to stop here, inshallah. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Now, if we have any questions, you can send them in now.